Hello, everyone. Welcome to another podcast, the On Stage podcast. Um, and introduce you to Rob and Dana Franklin, two brothers who are musicians. They've been musicians for 30 plus years, recording artists in genres hard rock, metal, and blues. They toured with two very successful bands, and they love speaking about their experiences in creating bands, performing and recording. They've taught music theory, beginning, advanced drums, and beginning guitar. And they love everything music. Thank you for joining us, Rob and Dana. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Um, can you tell us what inspired you to get into music and podcasting and everything else? Go back to the beginning.
Okay. Well, the beginning is basically I was one of those kids that my very first experience with a live band was at my aunt's wedding, and I saw the first time a drummer play live, and from that moment on, I was mesmerized. I was hooked. So after that, just basically went on, started hitting on pots and pans with spoons and ladles, and just progressed from there. So, went from that to from getting into a band program at high school, initially marching band, a symphonic band, and after that, starting my own bands and getting into rock music, and so that's the beginning of the musical journey. But the podcast journey, I'll let my brother explain here.
Well, the podcast we recently started, I mean, it's only been about 4 months now. This is something that actually Rob kind of came up with an idea. He's like, what about doing a podcast about all the music and everything that we've experienced and, all the trials and tribulations of starting a band to getting on stage and all that. And, why don't we share all of this information to other people that are just starting bands or trying to figure out how to go through all the process of, getting the band going, getting band members and getting on stage. And then of course, all the stuff of dealing with, the managers of clubs to try to play and the legalities of all that, all that fun stuff. So that's where the podcast kind of came in. And, musically I started, mostly because of watching my brother here. He's a few years older than me, so I'd watch him in the basement banging on the drums, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. I love music. I want to be in a band with him someday. So, I started a little bit later in life, about 17, 18. I picked up the guitar and, messed around with it a little bit, and was decent but not great. And I knew I wasn't going to be good enough to play in a band as far as with guitar. Um, with my brother here. So, he mentioned once, he's like, hey, think about getting, picking up the bass. Bass players are kind of hard to find, and, think about that. And so I picked up a bass, and it was kind of automatic. As soon as I touched it, it was the feeling I can't describe. It was the perfect thing. And, started practicing on that. And a couple of years later, we started out with bands and haven't looked back.
What kind of relationships did you have with your parents and your other siblings, if you have anybody? Did they encourage you to get into music, or they were like, no, don't touch anything, don't, no, no, no?
No, actually, my parents were extremely supportive. I'd never once heard them say, stop that racket or, any of those kind of things that you hear. They were always very supportive because they were, I mean, back when they were earlier, my father was actually a vocalist and my mother was a pianist.
Mm.
And so I think because of that, they kind of encouraged us, and they were, like I said, very supportive. And we have another brother who's actually a guitar player, and we have two that aren't into musical instruments at all, but they've always been very supportive and by our side through the whole process.
And our parents, I mean, every show that we played, even with the crazy heavy metal and hard rock that we were doing, they came to every show that they possibly could. Mostly in the back, so it wouldn't hurt their ears, but but they were always there and definitely supported everything we did.
Very true. Very true.
I like the fact that it says that you like you're recording artists in genres rock, hard rock, metal, and blues. But what I really want to know, Rob, is that you toured with two very successful bands, and who are they?
Uh, Probably the two most successful was one was from Reno called Monolith,
Mm,
and the second from Sacramento based that was called Eyewitness Blues.
mm.
Those were the two most successful as far as consistent gigging and traveling.
So, what's your favorite genre?
Rock by far, only because it's to me it's more intricate playing for a drummer. Blues is it's more of a steady type pattern for majority of the songs. I'm not going to say all, but for rock, there's more intricate breakdowns in style and timing and dynamics, and there's just a lot more elements to rock than there is to blues, in my opinion.
Hey Dana, is there any music or songs or that Rob plays that you say, "Can you turn that off, please?" You know I don't like it.
You know, no, there isn't because we pretty much agree as far as musically what kind of stuff we like and what we don't like. We're pretty much on the same wavelength with that. I mean, I'm not a big fan of country and hip hop and stuff like that, so I don't have to worry about that because he doesn't listen to that either. But as far as even with the music, I mean, on my side, I learned, listening to Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, the true creators of heavy metal, in my opinion. So my style of playing is mostly, emulates, Steve Harris, Geezer Butler, that type of stuff. But, I listened to, the more I started playing bass, I started listening to more genres. I'll even listen to some of the old style funk and Motown stuff just because the bass is so prevalent in that style of music. And just to hear different types and stuff and kind of incorporate it in my playing, so it doesn't all sound the same, like it's just rock or just metal. Throw a little bit of different styles in there, which I think all musicians should do.
And if I could add to that, actually, Dana is our primary songwriter. I mean, he comes up with the foundation of our most successful songs. He's been the songwriter. I mean, he's basically written down, the structure and the dynamics of the song, and everybody's kind of developed the song from his foundation of what he's written. So he's the primary songwriter.
Oh, well, thanks for that. I
Well,
appreciate
you're
that.
welcome.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first song you ever wrote or played? What was that like?
The first song that we really played that was real successful as far as crowd response was called a song called "Fool's Gold" that my brother had written, and it was once we played that together on stage, that was just one of those moments where your hair tingles. You just knew it felt great, and it came across great as well. And it was great crowd response. And it was just one of those moments you can't copy.
Yeah, definitely. It's when you play your own music and you can the crowd and the people are getting into it. There's
Especially
as
with your brother. I mean,
yeah,
come
yeah.
on.
When you're doing it with family members, it doesn't get any better. But when the crowd is loving something that you wrote and you're not covering it, or there's I can't even describe the feeling. And, you've talked to a lot of musicians, so I'm sure they've said the same thing. There's just no feeling. There's no drug that can copy that feeling.
Oh yeah. What was your mindset when you knew that okay, we're going to play this song "Fool's Gold" for the very first time? What was going through your head? Like they're not going to like it. They're going to throw tomatoes. Do you have the tomato bag with you? We're going to prevent them from hitting us. No.
No, I don't think that fear was ever in our mind because we felt that it was a great song, and if we could express that when we played it, we knew it was going to come across well, and it really did. It really did.
Yeah. What? So I always ask an artist whenever you write a song, it's based on experience, like a breakup, relationship failure, or death, for instance. What is the song "Fool's Gold" about?
It's it's about it is it's a personal thing. It's about a relationship that it just didn't quite live up to what it was supposed to be like. It was everything about it was, I mean, my original name for the song was going to be Pyrite, which is pretty much a synonym for Fool's Gold, and I like the way Fool's Gold sounded a little bit better. But yeah, it's all about the idea of a relationship that is supposed to be rock steady, and you think it's going good, but when you really break it down and investigate it a little bit more, you find out that everything about it was all fake. And so that's definitely what the song is about. And few weeks after that, I went through my first divorce, and so this kind of solidified what was going on in my life at the time.
Am I under an impression that the fool is you?
I mean, I guess it could be. I was definitely fooled.
So, what is your song creation like? Like, how did you put Fool's Gold together? What was it like? You went outside and said, "We're going to write the song," or we'll do the lyrics first. We'll do the music, the melody. Like you said, that Dana was the main songwriter. So, how did you start it?
Basically, it was just Dana and myself. We were actually at my parents' house at the time. We didn't have a rehearsal studio, so to speak, at the time. And we were actually in a room at my parents' house, just me and him. And that's he had created the bass line, and I developed the drum riff and the timing behind it. And it kind of snowballed from there. Then we ended up being with two guitar players that were phenomenal, and they added their parts to it, and Dana added the lyrics to it, and it just all fell together really nicely.
Yeah, it was music first, and then the lyrics. Is once we recorded the music part to it, I just sat at home and of course my state of mind at the time and wrote down Fool's Gold to match how the music was already written.
But funny story to back that up is when we were actually rehearsing that song,
Oh, yeah.
getting our two pieces, what we call the bottom end, bass and drums, while we were developing that in this house at my parents' house, which is, a pretty big house up in the Virginia Highlands in Reno, Nevada. But we went downstairs after taking a break, and my mom's pet guinea pig was dead because of the Valium. So, okay, this is probably a pretty good song. That's just kind of a funny little thing that happened.
Yeah,
But
that's how
I mean,
we
it
knew
was
it.
sad for my mom, but it was just something that's at the time we kind of thought it's funny.
Yeah, that's how we knew it was going to be a good song. You kill a guinea pig. That's a heavy metal song. It's good.
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine you pranking your brother Dana. Say, "Hey, Dana, I think I got a really good name for a song, Guinea Pig. How does that sound to you?" That'd be funny. That's awesome. Yeah. So, who were your big musical influences? Like, how did they shape your work?
For me, there's a few: Tommy Aldridge, Bill Ward, and Tommy Lee from Motley Crue. Those are my three primary. I mean, they're the ones that kind of influenced my style. And of course, when I was just starting, it was Buddy Rich, learning the rudiments and the rolls and all that. As far as technique, it was Buddy Rich because everybody said, well, you got to listen to Buddy Rich if you want to like really learn your rudiments and perfect your style. So that's kind of where I started, and obviously that guy's phenomenal. But then for showmanship, I started listening to Tommy Aldridge and Tommy Lee, just for showmanship and for how to deliver what you've learned in a more professional way and the way to appease the audience.
And mine, being a bass player, Steve Harris from Iron Maiden was definitely the guy that I listened to the most, and a lot of my style is a lot like him. A lot of the galloping and fast, and then of course Geddy Lee from Rush is just
Oh
absolutely
yeah.
amazing. How he can play the way he plays and then sing at the same time is beyond me. But those two are my biggest influences. And and Steve Harris, of course, not only the way he plays, but just his showmanship, the way he runs around on stage and the energy he brings, and of course he's the main songwriter for Iron Maiden too. So I I really like to follow a lot in the footsteps of what he's created. And, of course, like I said, I've listened to some other stuff and, Bootsy Collins from Parliament, just, that funk stuff and Flea from Chili Peppers, just, different styles. But, my heart is still with the whole, heavy metal and hard rock. That's where my heart is and always will be.
Okay, so if you ended up, you guys walk into a room, and you can choose any guitarist to be part of your new band. You have Geddy Lee, you
Oh,
have Sting, you have Robin Zander from Cheap Trick, you have let's say you have the whole room is filled with you big important musicians. Who would you choose?
Wow.
wow, that is a good and very tough question. For a guitar player, I'm gonna have to give that over to Dana.
From what I've been listening to, lately, and what I really like as far as what I think would fit into what we're doing right now, I would love to play with Zach Wild. I mean, he's just got
Good
the
choice.
way his style is, the way he plays on stage, and
Very
not
good
only that, he's
choice.
got an amazing voice. I would love to get together and jam with him. That would
Very
be
good
absolutely
choice.
amazing.
Well, now I'm going to throw Jimmy Page in there.
Oh,
Oh, well, yeah, you can't go
I
wrong
mean,
with Jimmy, of
yeah,
course.
yeah, can't go wrong with any of the classic.
So you choose Jimmy Page, and Eric Clapton goes, excuse me, I'm here too. Really? That's like, who are you going to choose? I don't know. No.
Well, someday in heaven, hopefully we'll get a chance to
Yeah.
jam with them all, when, when it happens.
Yeah, I mean, if Paul McCartney knocked on my door, which is really weird, and
Oh,
said,
yeah, I wouldn't put
"Hello,
him
I'm
away.
Paul McCartney. I heard that you want to play with me." I do, Paul. But I'm in a podcast right now. Just joking. That's awesome. When you perform, do you guys have an opener and a closer song? And is it always the same?
No, our mindset is always open and close strong. Of course, you want the whole show to be strong, but we always try to pick our like strongest songs for opening, and typically our strongest, if we're doing cover songs, our strongest original to close. So it all depends on the type of show that we're doing, but I would say, yeah, that's our mindset.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big fan of always closing with what you feel is your best original song. If you're a cover band, if you're doing just all originals, then you should still end with your best original.
Yeah, you want people to walk away thinking about that song because that's a lasting impression. Usually, is the last thing they hear.
Yeah, that's amazing. How do you connect with your fans when you're performing? Like, do you do it mostly on online social networks, or just like someone walks up to you and said, "Mr. Franklin," unless if they don't know your name, yes, that was a great song. How do you do? You ever had
Well,
that?
it's a little bit different nowadays because now it's all about social media. So we've
Yeah.
really had to adapt as far as that. But yeah, I love participating with when we do shows. Typically they're smaller shows, anywhere from 500 to 1,000, but smaller shows where you can get out and actually meet people. That's the way to really connect.
Yeah, I agree. That's the smaller places I think are more personal. You're seeing everybody, almost everybody in the crowd, and like I said, when you take a little bit of a break, if you're doing a couple of sets, you can actually get out and talk to the people out there. You find out it's like, hey, how'd you come out? How'd you hear about us? And just get the stories from everybody, and you really connect with the crowd and the audience.
That's true. Can you share the story behind one of your favorite songs you've written or performed?
Good story or bad story?
Yeah, whichever one you want to choose, and you don't have to use "Fool's Gold." You can use another song, something that
Oh,
something that's memorable, whether bad or good. We just want you to open up a little bit more.
okay. Well, we were doing one of our very first real big shows, but we had a new singer. He'd only been with us less than a month. I mean, the guy was phenomenal, but we were playing this song. It was actually another band song. It's called Swords and Tequila by Riot. But halfway through our set, we used it as like a song to introduce ourselves and to kind of, um, how do you describe it? We did halfway through the song. There's kind of a part where we stopped playing except for the guitar. The
Mhm.
guitar was doing the rhythm in the background, and I would come down off my drum riser, come and like slap hands with people in the front of the crowd and all that kind of stuff. And while I was doing that, I had accidentally kicked the lyrics off the stage of because our singer was like reading off the lyrics because he wasn't familiar with all the songs yet. And I had kicked his lyrics off the stage
Oh
and
my
got back up on that
goodness!
drum riser. And he's looking at me like, what the
What the
hell
hell?
did you do? It's like, so that was kind of a moment where, I mean,
Wow.
it ended up coming across fine, but it was just one of those moments like, it was an oh shit kind of moment. Excuse my language.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. If someone walked up to you and said, like, how would you describe your music style to someone who hasn't heard it before?
Ooh,
Oh,
good question.
that's there's so many. We just talked about this a couple of days ago on one of our podcasts. There's so many different titles and subtitles of even rock and metal now that if you say just regular rock music, I mean that could mean 30 different
Genres.
different things now, because you got death metal, you got screamo metal, and you've got new metal, and there's just so many
Classic
different
rock.
genres out there. So I think the best way to describe the type of music that we play would be just to name a couple of bands like Black Sabbath, maybe Scorpions, something that's in the classic rock, maybe hard rock genre, Judas Priest, something like that. That
Mm.
it'll give them a good idea of the type of music we're playing, because you just say metal now, and that could mean so many different things.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, let me test you. Van
Okay,
Halen,
Okay.
metal or not?
Van Halen,
Yeah.
I would say no. I'd put them more on a hard rock,
Hmm.
but
Okay. Okay. I agree with that.
Quiet
I mean, this
Riot.
is my Quiet Riot. That's kind of a funny one,
Commercial
because
rock.
yeah, commercial rock. Yeah, yeah. I mean, we actually opened up for Quiet Riot once back in the day, and
Wow.
that was a great show, and you know it was amazing to meet all those guys, and I got to say the late Kevin Dubrow was he was a
He
character.
was interesting.
He
He
was
was
a
an interesting guy.
he was a character without a doubt. But it was really nice to meet those guys, and but yeah, I think they're kind of on the edge of maybe being metal, but not quite. I mean, throw some other names out there.
Metallica.
Definitely metal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they've gotten a little bit more commercial than I would like to say. I love their first 3 or 4 albums, and lately they've gotten more commercialized. But their newer stuff seems like they're trying to get back to where they were. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Cliff Burton, their original bass player, so I love the old stuff.
Tool.
Tool, I would consider more progressive kind of metal, actually.
Hmm.
Great bass
Interesting.
player.
Interesting. So I asked a musician once. I said, "What's the difference between death metal and heavy metal? Like, what is the difference? What's considered death metal to you?"
To me, it's all about lyrics when you start getting in the sub genres. I mean, it's kind of what they're trying to portray in their lyrics. To me, that's the huge difference between at least those two that you mentioned.
Yeah, and when you get the vocalist that's doing more of the
I know. I was going to
like
do the same thing. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's what I would call death metal. If they're doing
What are they saying? Like, what the heck are you saying?
exactly,
Exactly.
exactly. I actually last summer I had the chance to see a band called Avatar, which I think they're out there as like maybe a death metal. I'm not sure what genre they would be labeled under, but I didn't know how I would react to it and how I'd like it, because my son actually invited me to go see that show,
Mm.
and they were actually amazing. But I would kind of throw them in there with the death metal, because some of the stuff you really couldn't understand, but the music was definitely metal. And yeah, death metal. I consider, if you can hear some of the lyrics, but not all of them.
Yeah. Uh, heavy metal doesn't mean you're so, But I know Tool does that quite a bit, and I'm not really into heavy metal, but it's kind of interesting to find out what is death metal, what is heavy metal, like what is which. Like Led Zeppelin, is that metal or not?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
and I guess it really
it's
depends on who you ask and you know, what style of music they're used to
Hmm.
listening to. And I mean, some people would probably say Led Zeppelin is heavy metal, where I really wouldn't consider them heavy metal. I would
it's more
say,
of a hard rock, I
yeah,
would think.
classic
I
hard
would say.
rock.
Yeah. Um. So it says that your music teacher, both of you, or just you, Rob?
I did
Mostly
it
rock.
for about 10 years. Basically, music theory, beginning, intermediate, and advanced drums, and beginning guitar. I mean, that was a great experience. It actually helped me to get back to learning the fundamentals, because as you play a lot, you tend to forget the fundamentals as far as like the basic rudiments and things like that. So it was great. I actually enjoyed it. Seeing that light bulb go off in somebody else when they learn something they really always wanted to learn is, to me, was the most exciting part of it.
What are you teaching them first? What's the first day like?
First thing is basically just getting to know each other. I mean, that's what I did. And then I on a chalkboard, I would show them, okay, well, here's the very basics of like notes, difference between an eighth note, 16th note, 32nd note, whatever it would
Wow.
be, whole note, half note, just the very basics. And then from there, just how my structure was just kind of getting to know them and seeing what they really wanted to learn, and then kind of do that on an individual basis.
Do you still do it, or did you quit that part?
No, I haven't done that for the last probably year. I
Oh wow.
enjoyed it, but I'd like to get back into it.
Oh wow. So what do you guys? What do you think is the best reward? What's the most rewarding part of being a musician?
To me, it's every part of it. I just love playing. Period. I mean, everything from learning new songs to performing them to setting. I mean, every piece of it I enjoy. I really do. How about
Yeah,
you,
I
buddy?
mean, the most rewarding for me, I think, was not only getting good enough to where I could play with my brother and be comfortable in playing in a band environment with other talented musicians, and them not saying, "Hey, who's this bass player? He sucks," and being on the same level as someone you'd call a professional musician, and then the highlight would be to play one of your songs, something that you've written, and for people to like it. I mean, that moves me more than anything that I can even name.
Good answer.
That's yeah, that would definitely be it.
That's interesting, Rob. It mentions that you have experiences in creating bands. How many bands have you actually created? You mind me asking?
Um, that I personally created about four.
Wow.
We Between Dana and myself, we've created probably two or three, but myself, I
Yeah,
mean four. And that's a great process. It's a great and frustrating process. Just getting the right people in the same room is sometimes the biggest challenge. And then even once you do have them in the same room, how those personalities develop over
Hmm.
time could be a huge struggle as well. So I mean, it's fun, but it can be aggravating and rewarding at the same time.
Were they all four of them successful, or did you just say, guys, forget it?
Yes,
You've
for the
been
most
together
part.
2 weeks,
Yeah.
you're gone.
Not the initial project, but over time, yes.
Hmm.
It would. It's when you're first starting a band, getting the right people in the room. Like I said, is the number one challenge. So sometimes it takes some tweaking. You got to get rid of a guy, add another guy, and
yeah.
it's a process. But all four that I've been, I mean, the main ones that I've been involved in have turned out to be pretty successful.
Tell me about the time that you met a band member where you just like, I don't really want to go up to him and say that you're not good for the band, that he should leave.
There's been a lot of those actually. So I mean, specifically, what are you asking me? How
Give
you
me,
handle that?
yeah, give me the one of the worst situations where you just don't know what to do, and they were good too.
Um, yeah. I hate to even mention those because it might indicate who they are, but
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it's always a very very painful thing to do. I mean, especially if you're talented, but if you're not getting along personality wise, you're not going to be able to like go out and play shows every weekend with this person if you just can't get along with them. So it's a very difficult scenario actually, but we've had to do that on a number of occasions. But in the long run, it's best for everybody in the band. So I mean,
And
you've
we,
got to
we,
do
we
it.
made one mistake, and that one we had a really good successful band, and we brought on a new singer because our old singer had to quit for some reason, and the new singer suggested we get rid of another member of the band because we were looking for more of a look instead of the way we were playing.
Mm.
We were basing on looks, and one guy just looked a little bit different than the rest of us, and so we parted ways with him, and that was a
Mm.
big mistake. He was a very talented guy, and
Yeah,
to this day, I hated the fact that we did that because the band pretty much went dysfunctional after that.
totally agree. That good example. Good example.
Oh wow! Right. So it's drums, right? I think
Right, right. Well,
so.
primary yes.
Yeah, and I know that you taught beginning advanced drums. Now, when you teach someone how to play the drums, what do you tell them to work on the snare first, or you teach them how to do thing and to be able to do this? Like, do you do this?
First, it's well primarily primarily. I mean, I teach like a 4/4 pattern to begin with because that's
Mhm.
the obvious one. The two, you hit the snare on the two and the kick on the two and the four. It's like eighth notes on the hi hat. Just a
Mm.
simple 4/4 pattern. And believe it or not, most people can do it that don't even think they can. There's always like 1 in 10 that just does not have the coordination to even do that. But most people, believe it or not, have the ability to play a basic rock song, which is your basic 4/4 pattern.
So, what about cover songs? What cover songs have you performed, or do you like cover songs?
I That's a tough question because I do like cover songs, but I'm not thrilled about performing. I prefer originals
Hmm.
only because it's something you've created. But we're currently playing cover songs, some cover songs, and we really enjoy them, like War Pigs by Black Sabbath, because that's a classic and everybody knows it and loves it. And it's got some good changes. I mean, it's not a typical pattern for most songs. It's got some different cool changes to it. So I mean, it's a tough question, but um, I do enjoy playing the good ones, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, have you faced any challenges or setbacks in your musical journey? How did you overcome them?
Oh,
Oh boy.
uh, good questions.
Yeah, I mean, there's been quite a few setbacks, and you know, I think the majority of them, and it's not even because of the musicians. It's a lot of it's just the personal stuff that gets in the way. Whether it's somebody got married or somebody got divorced or somebody had to move for a job. Those kind of things are really tough to overcome because if you've got like we had this one band Monolith back in Reno, Nevada that
Mm.
was very popular in the area, and we did a bunch of stuff on the West Coast, and when it ended up, bands were, we had a band member that had to leave for a job or move out of town, and it was tough to duplicate that band again with just adding another member. So we started over again, and yeah, the obstacles that come with keeping it, I envy some of these bands like the Iron Maiden and some of these guys, Scorpions, that have been on the road for 40, 50 years together. I mean, they've had a few lineup changes, but the majority of it is the same band. And I mean that's a hard thing to do. I'm amazed at some of these guys, Rolling Stones and Ozzy Osbourne, some of these guys that have been doing it for the number of years that they've been doing it and are still live. It's amazing.
Yeah, I know that people like Chicago, but I know Chicago originally started with Terry Kath, and then he died, and then Peter Cetera became the lead singer. Then he left. So, would you consider that Ozzy Osbourne was Black Sabbath? So when he left, Black Sabbath couldn't continue, or
No, they actually continued pretty well with like Ronnie James
Ronnie,
Dio,
yeah.
and they continued on pretty well. And I think I mean, Ozzy himself obviously continued to be very successful, but I think Black Sabbath carried on well. It obviously didn't have the same feel, so to speak, but they carried on very well.
Yeah, one of the few bands that I think lost their main vocalist and identity to the band and still carried on well. Both like I said, Ozzy carried on very well and Black Sabbath did, but you get some bands that lose a major part of their creative process and they're not the same.
so? What do you think about Linkin Park and the death of Chester Bennington and Mike Shinoda resurrecting the band by using Emily Armstrong as the lead singer?
I'm not familiar enough with them to actually give an opinion, to tell you the truth.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a little bit of them, but I don't think it's the same. With the change, it's to me it doesn't work. It's kind of like Van Halen. I loved early Van Halen with David Lee Roth, and I love Sammy Hagar, but together for me it didn't work.
Wow. How do you stay motivated and inspired when creating new music?
Just working. I mean, working on it. You know if it's going to really initially, you know if it's going to work or not. I mean, if you've got a like for us, we're like the bottom end, the bass and the drums. If that part's solid and it's got a good foundation, the rest of it is going to come together. And if it doesn't, you just move on. I mean, there's a lot of times where you have to scrap things that you think are going to be good, but this just doesn't gel in the end.
Yeah, wow. So, what do you think of AI music? Would you ever loan your voice to record a song, or
Not my voice.
would you ever use AI?
Well, once again, that's an area I'm not familiar enough with, but I don't like the idea of AI being involved in music. I think it takes away from the music is personal. I mean, it comes from your heart. I mean, it takes away from that aspect of it.
Yeah,
Wow.
and personally, for me, I hate to see some of these bands that are using backing tracks. You know, and even live, it's if you can't play the stuff that you recorded live anymore, then
Don't do
maybe it's time to
it.
be a greeter at Walmart or something. Because you just I when you see, and I know this has surfaced on YouTube and some other places, but when you see these bands that, all of a sudden the track and it sounds like they're still playing everything, but the guitar player isn't touching the guitar, singer's not singing, but yet it's still all there in its natural glory. It's like, that's just it's not right to me. I mean, I understand that some of these guys are getting up in age and maybe, the vocalist can't quite hit those high notes, but, that's expected. And, people want to go see the band for what they are, not for, what they're pretending to be.
Yeah. So, what role does technology play in your music creation or performance process?
Not a whole lot. We don't use a lot of like synth sounds or anything like that. But as far as technology, I think that's more based around recording, like practices and recording period. But I mean, I use a trigger for my kick drum, but that's the only really part of that we really use.
I mean, some technology is good, like Rob touched on a little while ago. It's, back when we first started playing, we were recording everything on a little boom box, in our storage unit. And so, now that we've gotten better, 8, 16 track, 32 track recorders that, you can put in your practice spot and, actually make your sound, your recording sound better, and you can hear your mistakes or your progressions and what you want to do better. I like that technology. And, I do got, a pedal board that has quite a bit of technology in it, with as far as being able to use different sounds and different pedals, and creating different sounds with different amps, whether it's
Mm.
tube or solid state. So I like some of that. I like some of that stuff. But
Do you,
yeah, I'm clear that the drums doesn't
mm,
use a whole lot of
yeah.
technology.
No.
Do you have any rituals or habits before performing or recording?
I have one. I always do a shot of Patron and a beer. That's my pre-gig ritual. But other than that, really no rituals other than just getting together with everybody. Say, hey, let's have a good show and move on.
Yeah, I think something that just lets you relax just a little bit. Not a big fan of those guys that want to drink a lot and hit the stage and they're halfway drunk and don't remember what they're doing. We've had a problem like that
We've
too.
had that problem, yeah.
But if you want to hit the pipe and get a little quick hit in, and
Oh,
something just to ease you a little bit, then
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Do you how do you feel that your music has evolved over time?
I think it's been a natural evolution. I mean, the better you get, the more relaxed you get with your writing process, I think. And I think what tends to happen with like a lot of new artists is they try to overplay everything. And I think we've gotten to the point where not to overplay your parts, but to play them in a solid way. And that's actually a learning process. A lot of new performers, they want to overplay everything. And that's something you learn over time.
That's very true.
And
Um,
sometimes less is more.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, less is more exactly. Unless you have a guy named Les playing for you, then that's more. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, on drums, less, more.
I'm not saying you can't be technical. I'm just saying, there's a time and place for all that.
Yeah. Um, can you share a moment when music profoundly impacted your life?
For me, it was when I was a kid and went to my aunt's wedding and saw my first live band. Like I
Mm,
said earlier, that was the moment I was hooked, and I'll be playing drums until I can physically no longer do it because of
yeah.
that first encounter with a live band.
And mine was, like I said, listening to my brother play in the basement all the time. I knew I loved music. As far as listening to it, I didn't. When I knew I wanted to be a musician, was one of the first concerts I saw was Ted Nugent, and the
Wow.
guy came swinging on the stage off a rope, and just
Loincloth.
yeah, I mean, just a crazy guy that he is, and just seeing how he acted on stage, how the audience reacted to him, and just the energy and the feeling around it all is like I don't want to be a part of the audience. I wanted to be on stage myself, and that Ted Nugent concert definitely what did it for me.
Yeah. What do you think of Triumph? I mean, we have the Metalworks studio just like 20 minutes from here, and Prince recorded his musicology album there. Nelly Furtado recorded there. If you walk into the recording studio, you'll see like the platinum records behind the frame and their autograph of all the people that, and it's owned by Gilmore from Triumph. Gilmore, and they come in during the week, but they have like tours every so often, and the recording studio is amazing. What they did is um, Queen literally allowed them access to the original recording of Bohemian Rhapsody, and the guy behind a fairly large 100 to 200 lever recording thing, where you go up and
The
down like
board,
this.
mixing board, yeah.
Yeah, so he would this is Freddie Mercury's voice, and he would isolate that, and this is then he'd isolate all the others, then he isolated. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I think it was
Oh, very
awesome
cool.
to see that. It was awesome.
Yes, as
Um,
far as Triumph, I mean, I've always liked Triumph. I mean,
mhm,
there's like I said, there's quite a few Canadian bands that I absolutely loved. Triumph, and of course Rush, and I
mhm,
think Loverboy was even from Canada, and I
mhm.
wasn't a
And
huge
we
fan of
opened for
them.
Chrissy Steele.
Oh,
She was
Chrissy
from
Steele,
Canada.
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
that's right, yeah. But yeah, I love and it's funny, not that this has anything to do musically, but for a while there, I lived on the West Coast and Santa Rosa, Napa Valley, and for Thanksgiving, me and my family would go up to British Columbia for Thanksgiving because it's not a holiday for them up there, and we always. To get away from America and all the traditions, we go up to British Columbia and Vancouver, and I absolutely love Canada. I
Mm.
mean, I'm a huge fan of Canada, with the exception of and I don't know if I should probably be saying this, but we went to the East Coast once and into Montreal and wasn't a huge fit. That's a different Canada. That's a different Canada. This is
Yeah,
the
yeah,
French Canadians. I mean, this is I like I love British Columbia. Absolutely loved it up there.
yeah,
Never been to Toronto, which I'd like to
yeah.
go to someday.
I'll give you a good tour of Toronto if you like. Take you up to CN
Nice.
Tower.
Love it.
Take you to the El Macombo, which is over almost 60 years old. That's where most of the bands play. You should look it up, El Macombo. It's been there for
Okay.
Definitely
years.
will.
It's been years. So
And
tell
I'm a
me,
huge hockey fan, and I
Yeah,
know
you are.
all
Yeah, you
Canadians are. So I mean, that's
are.
definitely. So tell me more about the podcast. Like, how do you find your talent? What's your first thing you do?
Well, our basic philosophy is we want to help musicians. I mean, that's kind of what we started to begin with. Everything from garage to stage. So we
Mhm.
try to encompass um, the stages that a musician is going to go through. For like right now, we've talked to the CEO of a Grass-Fed Music, which is in Los Angeles.
Wow.
We've talked to a producer. We've talked to a mixing engineer. Just all the kind of things that a musician is going to need to encounter in their journey from garage to stage
Wow.
and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, our first episodes, first couple episodes were, based on, okay, you're a musician playing in your bedroom. How do you get a band going? How do you even start the process of
Hmm.
auditioning or going to auditions or auditioning people if you want to start a band? And so we talk about all the, like Rob said, the journey that it takes from being a solo kid or an adult in your room to forming a band. Then once you got that band going, how do you approach clubs to get to play into the clubs?
Hmm.
And all the trials and tribulations
Yeah,
that you go
and
through.
all the all the fun and the humor and the bad stuff that kind of goes along with all of it, because there is good and bad. I mean,
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Wow. So to find a talent, you just reach out to them and email them, or do they come to you? Or
Kind of a combination of both. In fact, we were going to ask you the same thing: is how do you get yours?
I'll give you
yeah,
this.
I just saw one of your recent. Well, I'm not sure if it's recent, but one of your episodes where you were, interviewing the bass player for Accept,
And we're a huge
and
accept,
of course
fan.
I
So
jumped on that right away. It's like, oh, I'm like,
Martin
I was,
Motnick. Yeah, Martin Motnick and I
yes.
have become good
So
friends. Yeah, he's good. What advice would you give to aspiring musicians or songwriters? They walk up to you and said, I want to be a musician or a songwriter. What do I do?
good question. I would just say stick with it, stick to your guns, and follow your dream. I mean, take advice from things like this, from podcasts, from other musicians. I mean, just get every piece of information you can to get to that next level. That's really what it's all about. Is that drive. You gotta continue if you feel it. Continue with that drive and just go for it.
yeah, and for me, I would go more on the personal side of it. Also, is like, okay, you love music, great. How is your relationship with your significant other? Because it's going to
Good
change.
point. Good
I
point.
mean, it will change overnight. And I mean, between the two of us, we can't even tell you how many stories we've got of relationships gone bad because they just don't understand what you're putting into this band. They're like, well, what do you mean you're going to practice again? You did last night. It's like, well, yeah, and then tomorrow and the next day. And so I mean, the commitment that it takes, if it's something that you're really serious about, as I'm sure you've heard from other people you've talked to on the professional end, it's not only another job, it's your only job if that's what you want to do. And you've got to have that support from the family or your loved ones. Otherwise, you're going to be writing songs like Fool's Gold.
Good analogy.
Yeah, I had one of the singers from Little River Band on my podcast, and I asked him the same question, and he goes, "Don't."
Okay. That could be a good advice too, I guess.
Yeah, you could have just said "Don't." Well, I really appreciate this, guys, being on the podcast.
Hey, we
Really wonderful
appreciate it.
guest. I really look forward to getting this on the platform because this is amazing. I really appreciate how open you were. And oh, yeah, everyone, things will be linked down below. Rob Franklin, his brother Dana, and probably a little bit of music from Monolith, probably, and all the things you need to know. Thank you so much, Rob and Dana.
Great.
Appreciate
Thank
this.
you. It's a privilege.
Wait right there. Okay, everyone. Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.